Before we begin, a quick note. The opinions and analysis shared on Truth Seekers are our own interpretations of published research and should not be used as medical, financial, or professional advice. Always consult qualified professionals for decisions affecting your health or well-being.
And with that out of the way, welcome to Truth Seekers. I'm Bill Morrison.
And I'm Alex Barrett. Today is March 30th, 2026, and we're talking about Your Metabolism Wasn't Transformed, the truth behind the Ozempic miracle.
Let's get to the truth.
So I've been seeing this phrase everywhere. Ozempic transforms your metabolism. It's in the headlines, it's in the wellness influencer content, it's practically baked into the pharmaceutical marketing itself. And I keep thinking, that's quite a claim.
It really is. And look, I want to be upfront about something. When I first started reading the literature on this, I wasn't sure the framing was actually wrong exactly. The weight loss numbers are real. People on semaglutide, which is the active drug in Ozempic and Wegovy, are losing 15 to 20% of their body weight on average. That is genuinely impressive. 2 to 3 times more than older weight loss medications.
Right, and that's exactly why the claim spreads. The outcome is real, so the explanation must be right too. That's the leap everyone's making.
Exactly. Okay, but before we get into the mechanism, these drugs are genuinely everywhere right now. About 6% of American adults are currently on them. People are making real decisions about cost, about access, about how long to stay on them. So this isn't abstract. Right, and that's actually what made me change my mind about the framing. But let me walk through the evidence first, because the mechanism stuff is where it gets genuinely interesting.
Go on.
So, the STEP trials, that's the main phase 3 clinical trial program for semaglutide, published in the New England Journal of Medicine, JAMA, Nature Medicine, gold standard peer-reviewed research.
Right, and the researchers who ran these trials, including Novo Nordisk's own researchers, wrote this explicitly in the NEJM. Weight loss with semaglutide stems from a reduction in energy intake owing to decreased appetite. That's from the drug company's own trial.
From the drug company's own trial, reduction in energy intake due to decreased appetite. That's appetite suppression. The drug makes you less hungry, so you eat less, so you lose weight. And then there's another layer. Multiple independent reviews looked specifically at whether GLP-1 drugs increase resting energy expenditure. Basically, calories your body burns just existing, just keeping your organs going. Okay. The finding across trials is neutral effect. They don't change it. Your metabolism, in the literal scientific sense, is not being transformed.
Right. So the marketing says transforms your metabolism, and the actual mechanism is makes you less hungry. Those aren't slight variations on the same thing. Those are genuinely different claims.
Completely different claims. And look, I initially thought, okay, it's a bit of an oversimplification, but does it really matter? The drug works, the outcome is the same, people lose the weight.
I completely disagree with that.
I figured you might.
Because it's not the outcome that changes with the different framing, it's the expectation. If someone believes their metabolism has been fundamentally restructured, they have a completely different understanding of what happens next. Specifically, what happens when they stop taking it.
That's fair, and these are expensive medications. We're talking hundreds of dollars a month without insurance. If you're budgeting for a year-long course of treatment and assuming you're done at the end of it, versus understanding this is more like how we think about blood pressure medication and ongoing management strategy, those are not equivalent decisions. Okay, yeah, that actually lands differently than I was thinking about it.
Because a bit of a marketing exaggeration is fine when the exaggeration is cosmetic. This one is about duration. It's about what someone can realistically expect.
You're right. I was thinking about it from a data standpoint. Same efficacy numbers regardless of how you describe it, and missing that the description itself changes what a person plans for.
Which brings us to the evidence for that part.
Which is where it gets almost elegant as a debunk. Because the most compelling proof that this is appetite suppression and not metabolic transformation is what happens when people stop taking the drug.
Oh, I know where you're going.
The Step 4 trial. Same program. They gave participants semaglutide for 20 weeks, then switched half of them to a placebo. The placebo group gradually regained all the weight they'd lost.
All of it?
All of it. And then there's a follow up extension of the original Step 1 trial. Participants who stopped semaglutide after 68 weeks regained most of the weight within a year. And there's a 2026 Oxford meta analysis that looked at real world data and found patients were regaining about zero point 0.8 kilograms per month after stopping.
Wait, you said within a year. I thought the Oxford projection was longer than that.
Right, let me back up. The Step 1 extension shows most of it comes back within a year. The Oxford meta analysis figure, the zero point 0.8 kilograms per month, if you run that projection forward, it works out to reaching roughly their original starting weight in about a year and a half. Two different data points, similar story.
Okay, so roughly two-thirds of what they lost within a year to 18 months of stopping.
Roughly, yes. And this is the diagnostic proof. That's actually, I find this genuinely elegant from a scientific standpoint because you don't need a separate study to test the mechanism. The regain pattern tells you everything. If you'd genuinely transform someone's metabolism, if you'd fundamentally restructured how their body processes energy, the weight would stay off after you remove the intervention.
It's like a controlled experiment built into the follow-up.
That's actually exactly what it is. The Step 4 trial essentially proves the mechanism by removing the drug. The effect disappears because the effect was the drug suppressing hunger signals. The moment that suppression ends, the brain's hunger regulation returns to baseline.
That's actually quite good science, even if it's uncomfortable science.
It's very good science. Uncomfortable, as you say, but clean.
Okay, this reminds me of something. When I was covering healthcare, I'd get these press releases, and the language was always so carefully crafted. Transforms, resets, fundamentally changes. And I remember asking a PR person once, is there a quote from the actual researcher in here? And she sends over this paragraph from the lead author, and it's full of mechanism language, all very confident sounding.
And you'd have no way of checking whether the mechanism was actually established?
That's exactly it. Because it would sound like an explanation, it would sound scientific. The terminology is in there. And if you're a journalist on deadline and you have what appears to be a quote from the lead author confirming the mechanism, you're not necessarily going back to read the full methodology section of the trial.
Right. And so the press release language just becomes the story.
It becomes the headline. Transforms your metabolism. And nobody's gone back to check what the clinical literature actually says.
Which is precisely what's happening here. Anyway, what were we saying? The weight regain. The weight regain. And the researchers are actually quite clear about the implications if you read past the headline. The Step 5 paper explicitly frames obesity as a chronic, relapsing disease. Those words are there deliberately to convey that continuous management may be required. And there's a direct quote from the STEP trial team. These results support the benefit of continued semaglutide treatment for sustained weight loss.
Continued. Sustained.
Right. Those words only make sense if the drug is managing a condition, not curing it. If you'd actually fixed the underlying problem, you wouldn't need to keep taking the pill.
But what about people who say they genuinely feel different? Not just lighter, but like their whole relationship with food has changed. I see this all the time in coverage. I don't think about food the same way.
So, that might be real in the sense that eating less for an extended period can shift habitual eating patterns. There's some behavioral component there. But the clinical data is pretty clear that for most people, when the GLP-1 receptor activation stops, the hunger set point returns to where it was. The transformed relationship with food description doesn't match what the step 4 placebo group experienced, which was a fairly consistent return toward baseline weight.
So the feeling might be genuine, but it's not durable.
That's the honest read of the data. Yeah.
And I want to be clear because I don't want this to come across as this drug is bad.
No, no. The weight loss is real. 15 to 20% of body weight, that's clinically significant. 2 to 3 times more effective than older medications. The improvements in blood pressure, cholesterol, blood sugar that come with that kind of weight loss are genuinely valuable. The drug works. It just works by suppressing appetite while you take it, not by permanently restructuring anything.
And someone making decisions about this treatment deserves to know that.
They do. And I'll admit, when I was first looking at this, my instinct was to focus on the efficacy numbers and kind of wave away the mechanism framing. Alex's point about cost and duration is what shifted that for me. The numbers are the same, but how you describe the mechanism shapes every decision a patient makes downstream.
That's the bit I kept coming back to. Metabolism transformation is a promise about what the drug does to your body. Appetite suppression is a description of how it has to keep doing it. So, what do we want people to actually take away from this? The weight loss data is real and clinically meaningful. None of that is in question. The mechanism is appetite suppression via GLP-1 receptors in the brain. Resting metabolic rate is unchanged. And because the mechanism is appetite suppression rather than metabolic transformation, the effects reverse when you stop taking the drug.
Which means continuous treatment is generally required to maintain the benefits. Not because you or the drug failed, but because that's what appetite suppressants do. They work while you take them.
And the broader test, which I think is genuinely useful, is to check the language against the treatment pattern. If a drug requires lifelong use to maintain its effects, it's managing something, not transforming it. That framing matters when you're deciding whether to start, how long to commit, and whether you can afford to.
Transforms your metabolism is marketing. Suppresses your appetite while you take it is what the clinical literature actually says. And knowing the difference changes the conversation you have with your doctor.
The underlying data on these drugs is genuinely fascinating. It's just a shame the marketing language keeps muddying the water around it.
Agreed.
Right, that's all for today's dive into the data. Just remember, everything we've discussed is our interpretation of published research and shouldn't replace professional medical advice.
Absolutely. If you're dealing with health or mental concerns, talk to your doctor, not just us data nerds on a podcast.
I'm Alex Barrett,
And I'm Bill Morrison
and we'll see you next time.
on Truth Seekers.
Until then, question everything.
but verify with data.